All right.
Anthony and Elizabeth, you guys at 6:30, and so we can start whenever you're ready.
Okay. How many do we have for 30? Oh, that's a good group.
Maybe Will should give his spiel about how to behave.
Yes.
I'm happy to do that. So welcome everyone to our virtual committee meeting. We are still meeting remotely via Zoom because this is the most fair and open way that we can conduct this meeting without having to cancel it after the emergency declaration ended. So welcome. If this is your first time joining us, you'll notice that you're muted and you're unable to unmute yourself. And the only people who are unmuted throughout the meeting will be the co-chairs, Elizabeth and Anthony, and any presenters as they're making their presentations. The co-chairs will call on members of the public who wish to speak. You can participate by going to the reactions icon at the bottom of the screen and pressing the raise hand button there. Do not press the wave or the thumbs up buttons, those will disappear. Only press the raise hand button once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you are on the phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once the co-chairs call on you. You'll notice there is a chat. It is only available for technical support if you're having problems with the Zoom software. It is not to ask questions of the co-chairs or any presenters. They will never see those chats. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you'll need to go to the participants section at the bottom of your screen where you'll find the raise hand feature there. And finally, please do not raise your actual hand or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you and we don't want to miss you. I'm here for your support if you need it, so just chat me. Otherwise, I'll hand it back over to Anthony and Elizabeth and they can get things going whenever they're ready.
Okay. Hi, I'm Anthony Cohn, co-chair of CB8's Zoning and Development Committee. And I'd like to welcome you along with my co-chair, Elizabeth Ashby, to the June meeting of our committee. We have a reasonably full agenda this evening. I see that only because he's smack in the middle of my screen, I see Tony Lashuga from Department of City Planning, who waved his hand. And is there someone here from the Department of Buildings?
Yes, Josh Adams says.
Okay. There you are. Okay, wonderful. And I think that Elizabeth is going to kick off our agenda.
Thank you, Anthony. Our first item is the Goddard Safe Haven, and we're here to find out why the Department of Buildings considers it as of right. This is nothing to do with whether, the value of the thing, but whether it actually is as of right under the zoning resolution. So would the representative of the Department of Buildings explain to us why they've determined that it is as of right?
Hi, good evening, Elizabeth. Well, good evening, Joshua Adams, DOB. So I just kind of want to give you a general update of the current state of the application. You can hear me, correct? I clicked
Yes, yes.
Okay, perfect. So right now, we currently, Russell had sent over a list of concerns that CB8 had regarding this application, namely issues with like transient use and considering it a rooming house or something along those lines, right? So I forwarded those concerns over to the Manhattan Borough Commissioner's Office, who's currently reviewing the application, as well as our plan exam, who's also reviewing the application. We've currently put the job on hold. The job's on hold because for mainly a number of reasons, right? Our Manhattan Borough Commissioner had contacted the filing rep, or let me just start here. So we had some concerns about understanding what the applicant was trying to file with the department. They had stated in the application that they're filing for a rooming house, right? But when we had contacted the filing rep under the application, they had informed us that what they're attempting to put there is a proposed homeless shelter. So if it's a proposed homeless shelter, it can be permitted under use group 5 for transient use. However, they must provide documents from the Department of Homeless Services as well as documents from HPD stating that the transient use will not exceed 30 days. So right now, we're currently awaiting any documentation from the owner, or I'm sorry, from the filing rep, as well as their ownership, before we move on and removing the hold and moving on with the application process. So no further steps can be taken until they provide these documents from DHS as well as HPD. So that's the current state of the job right now.
So you have not approved it?
Correct. Well, it's in approved status, meaning that what they have provided to the department, we've reviewed it and approved it, but it's not approved for any kind of development. It's not approved for any development work or any kind of construction activity, right? They have filed some applications for excavation, supportive excavation, which we've issued objections for. So right now, there's no permitted activity under the Alt-1 application for a new building. They have to provide us this DHS and DHS and HPD documents before we take any next steps in reviewing their application. So it's all in ownership right now to obtain that from those relevant agencies.
Thank you. The problems that we've seen with the as of right assertion is that as of right is a transient hotel, not a transient safe haven. If it is a community facility, it's not a permitted. It's not a residential community facility here. So, I hope that that very serious consideration of the compliance with the zoning resolution is given. And I will now go to members of the public who may have questions. Yes, Anthony?
Yes, I'm sorry, Elizabeth. If I can just jump in here just for a second. I know you don't know the answer to this, Josh, because it's a question as much for Tony as it is for you, which is how are homeless shelters and homeless supportive housing classified by both the building department and city planning? In other words, it seems clear to me anyway that that there is no good fit for the various let's say homeless facilities within the current zoning. In other words, the use groups which were established in 1961 and have been not much altered since create this situation where a perfectly worthy project is kind of left orphaned in a way because it doesn't fit conveniently into any of the existing use classifications. And that was as much a statement as a question. But one thing you said, Josh, that I hope you can clarify, this is filed as an Alt-1, yes, not as a new building?
Correct. Alt-1,
Okay.
I believe they're filing an enlargement.
Yes. And then the other question is, and the enlargement, I presume, or at least from what I was able to see, is in terms of bulk and everything else as of right. But my other question is, have the appropriate agencies weighed in on whether or not this proposal meets their regulations? In other words, Office of Homelessness or all of those other ones. In other words, does this stuff fit within, does what is being proposed here, which I think is something like, 84, something like that. Does that fit within what is allowed for something that is called a safe haven? And I'm not asking you, Josh, to be able to answer that, but is that something that is being examined by the appropriate city officials, the other agencies?
So as far as my understanding goes, in our Manhattan Plan Exam Review, those appropriate agencies that were referenced, EHS and HPD in this instance, have not. Well, I can't speak to those agencies in terms of have they weighed in, but what we're requiring from the owner, or I'm sorry, from the applicant, is that they provide the documents necessary in order to progress the application from those agencies, DHS and HPD, namely. So in order for us to move forward, they must provide those documents. And in that instance, I'm not sure what is required from those agencies to weigh in, but we need those. They need to contact those appropriate agencies and retrieve those. As far as your first question related to shelters, so under the zoning resolution, shelters are typically under use group 3. But department does have has previously approved rooming houses or lodging houses under use group 5, but only for homeless shelters. Now, I don't have on hand any of those relevant or any of those past approvals, but there were precedents in manufacturing and commercial districts as well. But
could you get us some of those?
Sure, I can.
That would be great. Yeah, because I think, and I apologize to everybody else on the call, because this is sort of getting into the weeds of this. It looked to us, who actually look at these things way too much, that use group 3 was a good match. And so we begin to wonder, whether city planning, Tony, this is a hint for you, could look at a change to uses so that those various shelter uses are better defined under the zoning resolution. But so it feels like a stretch for a commercial and or manufacturing, especially manufacturing district. And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you, Josh. Those were actually very useful. And one other tiny question. In other words, unless the applicant supplies whatever requisite information from GHS and HPD, unless they supply that to you, you will not grant plan approval.
Well, currently the job is on hold until they provide those documents.
Yeah, okay, cool. Thank you. I'm sorry, Elizabeth.
Are any members of the public here to ask questions or speak on this? I guess not. So we'll start with the members of the board. And the first person who signed up is Sherry Weiner.
Sherry, you can unmute. And just a reminder to everyone who's participating that they can go to the reactions button at the bottom of their screen and use the raise hand button there, or it's *6 on the phone.
I'm going to be a cynic and say, what happens if the applicant checks off the right boxes and presents themselves as a permitted use, and then they kind of roll into a non-permitted more than 30-day application? What mechanism does your department or the city have to make sure that what's been approved is what they're actually doing and we don't have an illegal use at that location?
You're saying that if they get approved and then conduct the work, and then once they're in operation, they have transient use greater than 30 days? Is that your question?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so that in that instant, sorry, go ahead.
No. I mean, I think one could assume that could happen. And I'm just curious, what safeguards does the city have to prevent that?
In that instance, if someone of the public or yourself witnesses this ongoing, or you receive a complaint about this, refer to the Department of Buildings. We'll go out and inspect it. If we find that there is transient use for greater than 30 days, then we can also issue violations for that. I believe there's also the Mayor's Office of Special Enforcement as well that would also inspect for transient use or illegal hotel. In this instance, it would be considered an illegal hotel or outside of its prescribed use per the C of O.
Great, thank you. Okay.
Okay, the second person is Michelle Birnbaum.
Michelle, you can unmute. There you go.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Thanks. I'm really just wanting more clarification. Maybe my fellow board members, as they ask their questions, will give me more clarification. But it goes to the heart of Anthony's question, and now I'm concerned that we're not going to get an answer. Because it sounds as though if the developers submit the paperwork that's being requested, then it's a go. But that doesn't give us the answer to the question as it's stated on the agenda, which is on what basis they're determining that this is as of right. So I guess you don't have an answer for that now, but if we can get further clarifications, maybe by the questions that my fellow board members are asking, I'm happy to sit quietly and listen. But to me, I need that fundamental answer. And it doesn't seem to be solved with whether or not the developers comply with the currently requested paperwork. So I'll listen closely and I'll hope for clarification. Thank you.
Sure.
They have to not just provide the paperwork. The paperwork has to support their claim that they comply with the use groups. And that's where we've had these questions, because they're allowed to be a transient hotel, but they're not a transient hotel. These and they're allowed to be a community facility, but it has to be an ambulatory community facility, and that isn't the place where you sleep. So that's why all these questions, and that the agency should not grant them a permit unless what they say they are is actually what they are. Anyway, sorry to interrupt, and Russell Squire is next.
Thank you. So I just wanted to, well, first of all, I think Anthony put the point very well, which is, we've got this old zoning resolution language that, in many cases doesn't necessarily neatly line up with, current uses and current building types. And so, there's this sort of issue that we have under the zoning resolution of having to try and match up things that don't necessarily neatly match up. So I just wanted to clarify, because it wasn't completely clear, in terms of the precedents that you're going to be providing, that's precedents of situations where there are safe havens that are in use group 5 or approved to be in use group 5. Is that correct? Because my understanding is that that's generally how those things are done. So I just want to clarify what it is that you're providing.
Yeah, so I had received this information from our code and zoning specialist in Manhattan. Now, I will clarify with them because they didn't specify if those approvals were Manhattan specifically. So I'm just going to confirm with them before I provide you a direct answer on that. I don't want to tell you that it's yes or it's Manhattan or whatnot before I confirm, but I will confirm it with them and hopefully get back to you hopefully sometime this week or next week. I can follow up with you, Russell, as well as Will, just give you that information.
Okay, good. Yeah, and I'll keep the committee in the loop too. So yeah, just to be clear, I guess from my perspective and kind of what my question is, what I think would be useful is, my understanding is that it's typical for safe havens to be in use group 5 or to be approved to be in use group 5 areas. So what I think would be useful is if that's the case, for you to provide us with examples or precedents where that's taken place, right? That would be very helpful. I actually, frankly, don't think that Manhattan versus other boroughs is necessarily strictly relevant to that point. So, based on that understanding, to have precedents where safe havens are approved under use group 5. And then I think if it's the case that's right, and you have those precedents, then what I think the other sort of follow-up item that we'll want is an explanation of why it is that safe havens are right for use group 5. And I think, frankly, notwithstanding the 30-day question, what the explanation is for that, essentially. That I think is kind of what we're looking for and what I was hoping to have. So that I think would be useful.
Sure thing. Okay. Well, okay. Yeah, I'll provide it, or I'll reach out and see if we can get that other people.
Thank you. And our next board member is Elaine Wolfe.
Thank you. Couple of questions. And I think that the committee has asked numerous times, including through the office of Ben Kalos, for answers and has not received any. So I would hope that they would be responded to. But when I hear DOB saying, DHS and et cetera has to approve the design, I guess, as I looked at the design and knowing what the regulations are at DHS, and I'm surprised DOB doesn't know this and doesn't talk to the agency, is that terraces or balconies and use of roofs is not a permitted use when they do a contract with an agency because of questions of danger. My other point is that the zoning that's here was left in place so that our community would have the opportunity to have businesses, whether it's an auto shop, etc. And that's why the zoning is what it is. I think we need to continue to have that type of zoning as we have in the 70s going from York to the East River. These are important items or businesses for us to be made whole. My concern is that you have a for-profit that has real estate and development interests that purchased the property. And then Goddard Riverside is the nonprofit provider. But it seems, given the presentation by Goddard, that indeed this use of that property would be for longer than 30 days because the population that they are going to, quote unquote, try to accommodate are the most difficult of our homeless population that wish to stay on the street. And so the 30-day limit would be impossible because Goddard themselves said that they have no intention of pushing anybody out. So I think we need to look at programming here and what's being said, and then what the developer who owns the property says. And in my conversations, in our meetings, the lease normally for a safe haven is up to 10 years. In fact, it's a 1-year contract, then it goes for another 4, and then it could go for another 5. And when I asked the developers what would they do with the property in 10 years, they said they'd probably turn it into a hotel. So I don't know what the motivation is. I don't understand a lot of the dynamics, but it seems to me that there was some planning done by a for-profit developer to make some money from the city because they will get hefty rent from DHS for this. And then in the end, if it doesn't work out with the safe haven, they can just take it and do what they want. And by the way, if you look at the regulations and what DHS has put out, they only move into areas where the zoning permits them to be. And I'm not sure where DH is because this is not zoning that is as of right. So if you could respond to some of that, some of it you might not, but also get back to us with some answers, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, Elaine.
Go ahead.
So as I had mentioned earlier, any complaints or any, witnessing of use or stay greater than 30 days, if in the event that this application gets approved and the work is, performed and completed, as I said, as I stated, the department of course would go out there and inspect, and if we witnessed a violating condition, we would issue a violation for that violating condition. As far as any future considerations of how they plan to use the building, the department can't provide any comment on that until we receive any kind of application or filing showing such. So I can't really comment on that, but as far as I know, that what is required from DHS and HPD, I would say is just a I'm not sure if it's if it's in the form of a letter or some sort of other review from DHS, but I can follow up and find out. They need to receive documentation from those departments saying that it will not exceed 30 days. So whatever the applicant sends to us, they receive this documentation, and then it goes under review, and they meet all the compliance necessary to move forward. Then the department can continue the review. Of course, it's going to be under a rigorous review from Manhattan or from our plan exam unit as well, So if there's any other objections that they that we observe during review, we would issue those. So just because they provide that documentation to us doesn't mean it's a go to move forward. It's a go to move forward over this current objection, but there may be additional objections in the future once continued review is ongoing.
Thank you
All right,
very much. And our next speaker is Marco Tamayo.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I think before I do my statement, I think we had to clarify some issues. One of the issues is, for instance, is Shari Winner. She says cynical. She's not cynical. She is thinking what are these developers going to do that? And I will explain to you and DOV, Mr. Adams, be careful with that application. We are not against homeless. We are in favor whatever the zoning resolution said. And in the way that was presented to us and presented to DOB, basically I didn't find no errors so far, except that the plan examiner is supposed to call and ask questions from the applicant, not from the expediter, from the applicant, because now everything is directly to the applicant. So the applicant is good to lie in front of you. So actions we can take against him. And ask the question, what are you planning to do exactly? I mean, one of the things that raised a lot of weight when I saw the project is an old building with a structural system extremely low and completely according with the new code is absolutely wrong. And they propose to increase the size of the building. I think this is why you put a hold on this job, because he removed the joists, he removed everything except the walls, just only trying to lie us or to lie in the process that they are submitting an application for enlargement, which is in this case it has to be a brand new building, and that's what it is. I don't know why they do that. Maybe it's because they try to cheat in the building department's fee. Maybe because they want to use different codes to escape from this regulation. Because this is a narrow load, 25 and 100. It's almost hard to provide two means of egress in 25 feet because the distance between these two exits it requires minimum 30 feet. And if the lot width is 30, it's 25. Right there, it's many things. Well, Elaine is right when she said, yes, we have a combination of a developer that actually built the project and cheat the Department of Buildings. I'm saying it directly straightforward because that's what I checked in the application. And the NGO. The NGO, the main issue what I found right here is you're going to house homeless, fine. But I think you were wrong when you said it's 30 days. No, it's 90 days. According with the section 50 of the multiple dwelling law, it's 90 days. 90 days. So the 90 days, what's going to happen after 90 days? You're going to evict them? You're going to put again in the streets? No, absolutely not. So the issue is probably in this case is it need to have more clarification in that specific group 5. In this case, he applied group 5A, and homeless shelter is in group 3. That's what you said. Okay, now my statement, first of all, let me put it this way. That's what I prefer. This is a dubious application. First, this applicant is proposing to build a transition house, which by the multiple dwelling law, section 50, you cannot house people or live in accommodation no more than 90 days. What if this applicant is unable to find permanent housing within the period stipulated for these families? Then this applicant is planning to convert this building into SROs or a hotel, because this applicant cannot evict these residents and put them on the street again. In short, this developer is planning to break the rules of the transition housing. Second, this applicant is planning to create crowdedness inside of this building. This applicant is proposing to shelter around, if I'm not wrong, they said 80 or 89 people in 21 rooms. This means that each room will have 4 persons per room, creating unhealthy ventilation conditions for its residents because they are homeless, maybe, I'm sorry. Furthermore, we know the Delta coronavirus is easily contagious in crowded spaces and other respiratory virus. Finally, this applicant wants to enlarge the condition of this poor structuralized building. From the structural point of view, this is an audacious proposal because no structural engineer can recommend to mix a weak structure with a safer structure. Indeed, the Department of Buildings put at the stop. The department put at the stop because the site, this contractor demolished the scope of more beyond the scope of work permitted. That's what I'm reading, your violation that you wrote. In short, this application is trying to cheat DOB and us and run away from the zoning resolution, which is basically the intention of the zoning resolution is not that is wrong. The issue is right here is the developers always they figure it out how to cheat the system. One of the best training place to learn to cheat in the system is most of the employees from DOB. Most of the employees of DOB, they are training very well because they know the problems, and then they left the DOB and they become consultants outside, explaining exactly what is the main problems of DOB. So we are in serious problem. I cannot blame DOB. I cannot blame the zoning resolution. The only thing we had, Mr. Lechuga, that's for you, is the process of the zoning resolution. It has to be a dynamic process. Constantly has to review. Yes, indeed, you do in many other zoning resolutions in the building in the book, but in this case, I think we are running in different direction. Now, what happened right here is basically is the money. Money is the developer. They found out that the city paid good
Could
money.
you wind up?
Yes, I'm finished. It's paying a lot of money, and they want to cash in. And I think that is the situation right here. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Do you have a DOB answer to that, or I would like to just see what city planning has to say on this?
So, sorry, I was trying to remember there was something he had stated. I was trying to remember the middle portion there. Why don't you go on to city planning, and then maybe when if Tony has anything he wants to add, it might jog my memory there. I apologize.
Yeah. So
thank you.
So the Department of
Tony?
The Department of City Planning was recently asked, or a while ago, was asked about the Goddard Safe Haven, and I can give you the same response that we gave previously, which is that this is not a proposal that has been referred to the Department of City Planning. We will not comment on the correctness of the Department of Buildings interpretation. It's their prerogative to interpret the applicable laws for individual sites and determine if they are as of right. If they determine that they are as of right, then we support their prerogative to that interpretation. If it is not an as of right application, then they will be referred to us, or they will pursue a different avenue. And that's about it.
Thank you very much.
To answer to respond to Marco, so I know he raised a number of concerns regarding the application. I just want to remind him, as well as everyone else in the meeting, that the challenge period is currently open for the application. unfortunately, it's coming very soon to the close. I believe that challenge period closes on July 1st. But you can submit a challenge to the department's interpretation of the current zoning for this location. So I can add it into the chat before the end of this meeting. I'll include the links to where you can find information on challenges. And if you would like to submit a challenge, you can do so. You can actually add it.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, Elizabeth. Just this is sort of a question for Tony. Did I hear you correctly? And I very easily could not have, that you don't comment as a matter of course on things that happen at the building department unless the building department essentially jumps up and down and waves their arms.
Yes, it would be inappropriate for the Department of City Planning to override the Department of Buildings interpretation.
Okay, so if in fact, as part of the challenge process, someone were in fact to challenge the zoning, city planning would then be involved, or do they need a request from the building department?
I would see no reason why city planning would be involved. The Department of Buildings is perfectly competent at interpreting the zoning resolution as it stands and justifying their interpretations. Yeah.
Okay, I was just curious as to the procedure. All right. Sorry, Elizabeth.
No, that's okay. I think we're all, the more we hear, the less we know what we can do about this situation. I have great support for shelters and safe havens and so on, but I also feel that the law must be respected, and but there are changes that can be waivers, all sorts of things that can address the fact that they're not a transient hotel, whatever one thinks of it. That's what they're supposed to be. And they don't fit the definition of the non-accommodating community facility. I've realized they have a great difficulty, and Denise pointed out that the zoning resolution may present them, but I don't think the way of getting around this problem is to bend the law. If necessary, it is to change the law if there's an error there. Marco, do you have a couple more things to say?
Yeah, I'm going to be very quick. Thank you, Elizabeth. The issue right here is Mr. Lechuga is next. I think you know what's going on right here. DOB, the only thing they has to do is deny the application. And they had to explain why it has to be denied. That triggered your action, Mr. Lechuga. And at this time, you are seeing that's we're moving in that direction. And I think you can start predicting and preparing something, Mr. Lechuga, in that direction. And DOB, yes, DOB, the only thing is has to figure it out and put an objection in this application so the developer cannot continue with this project unless it is in compliance with the zoning resolution. And then that triggered exactly your decision to work it out in that direction, Mr. Lechuga. Thank you.
So I do just want to clarify really quickly that the Department of Buildings denying an application does not automatically trigger action with the Department of City Planning. This particular developer would then have to initiate a proposal with the Department of City Planning, and at that point, then we would appropriately work with that developer based on whatever action they were proposing. But their denial in no way automatically initiates something with us.
You're absolutely right, because it could be building code, it could be different codes. But in this case, it has to be specifically the zoning resolution. And the zoning resolution, the DOB has to have their interpretation, because they're the only institution can interpret it right here. No, even the professional, just only DOB. DOB now they understand what is triggering this unclear zoning, and DOB has to figure it out and explain it to the applicant and deny this application. Then they basically has to start for the process for DOB. I'm sorry, for city planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Has any member of our committee got a recommendation of our next steps on this?
I do.
Russell Squire?
So yeah, I think, I mean, we've asked Josh to give us some more information on precedents for safe havens, right? Because I think, you know, essentially where we're at is, you know, again, if it's the case that safe havens are generally used in use group 5 and generally approved for doing that, then, you know, I would think that would abate some of the concerns. And if that's the case, then I think they can also explain why that is. I know that Josh can't necessarily do that, but it sounds like we'll be able to get some more information from folks to explain what the precedent is. And if in fact it is the case that what's being done here is consistent with the precedent, then I think that would be welcome news. And if it's the case that it's consistent with the precedent, I gather that they're going to be able to explain further why that is. And so that, I think, is the information that we're waiting on. And again, if that is in fact what the precedent is, then I think we'll be able to get that. So I think the thing to do is to essentially await that info and await that confirmation and take it from there.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, but I really want to say on the issue of precedent, yes, that is interesting and up to a point, but the precedent may have been wrong all along. And following a precedent that's in error is not something that we would want to support. At least,
well,
in my opinion, you do not. I think if you find that they've doing something and have been following this all along, and it's wrong, then perhaps what we would do is recommend that they change the law rather than just keep on misinterpreting the law.
Well, I think, yeah.
Anyway, we'll wait for the information, then take it up when we have it, and then see what we do from there on. And I think, I hope the chair of the board could ask Safe Haven, the Goddard, and the Department of Buildings to keep us up to date and informed on this issue, because we don't want it to get out of the barn until we've got it straightened out. So, if Russell, could you just put us on record that we want both, because neither has been particularly forthcoming until this moment, and the councilman has not been able to get Goddard to answer the questions about it for months, and repeatedly has tried, which is not a very encouraging sign. But I'm very grateful to the Department of Buildings for coming and talking to us now, and I think we probably know more.
Yeah, and I will. The answer to that is I just wanted to say I will definitely keep you guys and try and continue to try and get more info and keep you in the loop about what I learned.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, what was the next item, or notice to the community board about changes to zoning lot designations. And we've had a letter from the Department of City Planning regarding the proposal that is being withdrawn at the moment. But I hope that you'll discuss it, where we are, and also discuss, even if they don't pass this law, can the Department of City Planning keep us informed of zoning lot changes? And I hope that rather than just limiting it to mergers, that we'll be informed about any zoning lot change, simply because we have a very bad example of somebody who bit a small, undevelopable piece off his zoning lot in order to work around the zoning resolution. This was the tower on East 88th Street, I believe. Mm-hmm. So we do want to be involved, and we want to be kept up to date on this, and we'd like to know how you can help and where we're going on this one.
Okay, I assume that was directed at me. Yeah. So first of all, we received your full board resolution from back in October. Our letter in response to that was really just clarifying that, I'm not sure where the board got the impression that the Department of City Planning is pursuing some sort of action that relates to zoning lot mergers, but we are not. We never have been, and at the time we don't plan to do anything related to zoning lot mergers, which we did express in the letter that we sent back to you. There are currently, proposed bills going through the city council, through your political representatives, that relate to this. And part of the reasoning for this is that zoning lot mergers are something that happen through, property owners can request zoning lot mergers or divisions through the Department of Finance. And that's where that action actually takes place. It's a financial transaction between property owners. So it actually does not go through the Department of City Planning. And when zoning lot mergers happen or zoning divisions happen, those are not sent to the Department of City Planning. So your request that we forward along that information or share that information with the community is actually not something that we could do. That would be something that the Department of Finance could pass along to you. And I think support of the few bills that your council members have put forward is actually your best avenue to achieving what it sounds like you were describing. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I think we'll follow that advice.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
I'm sorry, Anthony.
Elizabeth. I can't help myself. So essentially what you're trying to say is that city agencies don't normally speak to each other about matters that might be of interest to those other agencies.
I'm saying that when it comes to mergers,
well, no, because you said the same thing. I'm sorry, I don't mean to pick on you, but you're here. But you said the same thing about the Department of Buildings, that they're the Department of Buildings, you're city planning, and you don't speak to each other unless you're forced to do so.
Well,
I don't mean speak to each other.
I don't believe that that's what I said, but I think
it is.
When it comes to zoning lot mergers, that is something that goes through the Department of Finance, and the Department of City Planning is not alerted to those zoning lot mergers.
Okay, that's good to know. But basically, I'm sorry. I just want to just sort of. I understand. We addressed our request to the wrong agency. We should be requesting this information from the Department of Finance.
Yes, or through your political representatives who have put forward bills that advocate for this exact change. Like this is not a change that happens at the staff level at the Department of City Planning.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Because Anthony, you're
I'm up. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Josh. My next, one of the things that we've seen a lot of in our community has been demolition followed by years and years of vacant lots. I'm an architect. I certainly recall a time when the Department of Buildings did not permit demolition before, at the very least, a new building application had been filed. And I mean, anecdotally, there is the corner of 78th and First Avenue, the block front between 80th and 81st on First Avenue. There is the latter of which is an Excel project, or maybe an Excel project at some time. There's also the entire block front between 76th and 77th on 3rd Avenue, which was demolished a year and a half ago. And so that that's the Lenox Hill, Northwell Lenox Hill extra site. And so I guess the question is, how did this happen that the Department of Buildings apparently, maybe they didn't, apparently changed their procedures to allow demolitions and allow vacant lots indefinitely? And why? And then the third piece of that is, how about going back to requiring at the very least a building application, if not an approved new build? And it's not just on the Upper East Side; it's all over the city. But we're here.
Understood. Thank you, Anthony. So I asked this question over to our borough office, and I spoke to our borough commissioners about it. It's my understanding that what the department would not do is issue a new building permit without a sign off of a demolition, as opposed to the other way around. So I asked about this, and I didn't seem to find any prior requirements that required a new building application before a demolition application is approved. But we do require that a sign off from demolition that there is sign off for demolition before a new building application is approved. That makes sense?
No, I understand that's the way you're doing it now. I know it was the other way around. And so I'm wondering how that changed and why that changed. Because what happens in particular, if we look at the actually all three anecdotal examples that I offered earlier, in each case, a number, and block front's probably 40, and the corner lot maybe 25 or 30, so-called affordable housing units were demolished 3 years, 2 years, year and a half ago, right, and have not been replaced by anything. I mean, not luxury housing, not nothing. And there are no apparent plans, at least none that we've been able to see, for what will replace them. And so it seems that this is a problem that we being the city, all of us, are allowing to occur that maybe shouldn't. And the question is, if the Department of Buildings, which I do believe is largely all powerful as an architect, if the Department of Buildings can't do anything about it, who can? And how do we create a situation where we can in fact preserve longer affordable housing before it's going to be turned into luxury condos, if nothing else.
Right. Well, I don't think the department can really comment on how owners of lots use their private property. I mean, private property is private property. The owner of it can do with it as they wish. If there's issues of, unkempt properties, I'm sure DSNY or DOH can get involved. There's a rat situation, of course. But as far as vacant lots, the owner, if they want to demolish the building and they receive approval from us and they demolish the building and they left it vacant for 5-10 years, I mean, that is the prerogative of the owner. Unless, of course, there is, I don't know, let's say there's storage of construction materials or some other materials on there. I'm sure the department could go out there and probably issue a violation for that. If there's, permits for or expired permits for construction or development that was prior approved. But vacant lots, I mean, I don't think there's any agency that can really tell an owner of a private property to build something there.
Well, you don't have to give him permission to demolish.
What's that?
You don't have to give an owner permission to demolish a building.
Well,
if he doesn't have at least something proposed, doesn't have to be approved, something proposed. It's just a question. It's okay. I understand.
Yeah, the department can't do that. If the owner contacts the department or gets the licensed design professional, provide documentation to the department and moves through the process of obtaining a demolition permit and meets all the requirements to conduct that work, the department will issue a permit. Now, if the owner decides to pull the permit back and say, we don't want to do this, that's on the owner. But, if they go through the process of obtaining a demolition permit and meet all the requirements to provide all the necessary required items for us for approvals and permitting, then they can receive that permit. As for the future development, again, they would have to contact the Department of Buildings to conduct that work, unless they, God forbid, perform work without a permit. Of course, we would go out and issue a violation for that. But private property, again, is private property, and owners can do with it what they wish.
Okay, now unless somebody, oh no, it looks like Marco wants to speak. Marco.
Thank you, Anthony. I think that Alida and Rita, they didn't speak. I can be at the end, if you don't mind. It's up to you, Anthony. Can you hear me?
You're
okay.
First up on my list.
Okay, thank you. I understand your point of view, Anthony. I mean, you want to preserve as much as possible affordable housing, but at the end of the day, they're gonna demolish sooner or later. And the problem is, I don't think it's DOB problem. I think it's legislation problem. We need our decision makers to make a decision in that direction. To have strong penalties for do not build for such a period of time. Well, they can give you 2 or 3 years to have emptied the lot. But in the case of the lot, for instance, you mentioned Mr. Chu on 78 on First Avenue, this is years, is almost a jungle inside. And you're absolutely right. And now they are selling $90 million because they speculate in that direction. So, but the point is, that properties have other problems. Many people have been fall outside, and there is a lawsuit against the owner because they didn't fix. And DOB, it should keep. That's probably the role of DOB in this case. They constantly inspect those properties to see if it's in good condition, especially the sidewalk and the fencing. That will be in that case. And the other case that I want to comment is about the East 88th Street. The East 88th Street, basically what it was a misinterpretation for the memorandum of DOB. DOB, they already corrected. The only problem is they didn't correct retroactively, and that was very bad to hear that. And that's it. So that's the only comments. Mr. Lechuga, this is a question for you. Do you have projections of middle-income housing, to producing middle-income housing? Because what I'm finding right now, a pattern in our community is they demolish affordable housing and they build luxury housing with extremely one.
Oh, we lost you, Marco. You are frozen. I think, Tony, the question, Marco's question, since he's frozen, appeared to be about whether there were Department of City Planning had projections on he described it as middle income housing in our community district.
Like what? I'm sorry.
I don't know.
Housing that we anticipate coming down the pipeline.
Yes. Yes.
You know, so much development happens in this city as of right, and so those are projects that go through the Department of Buildings and not through us. So, you know, we do have our population fact finder tool, which, you know, allows communities to see what's happening in their community and you know, what that looks like on the ground. But in terms of like analyzing data about future housing based on you know, as of right development, you know, I don't have that at hand. No, you know,
okay.
The Department of City Planning, Housing and Population Division does work across the city with other agencies to try to understand what our, you know, housing is going to look like in 5 or 10 years based on those sorts of permits that are filed continually. You know, and I can inquire with them about housing projections for the community. But offhand, I don't have that information. No.
Okay. Rita is next. Wherever Rita is.
I'm new to all this, and I believe that Anthony had the right vein of this conversation. I don't know where this belongs, but I can use this as an example, is that Henry Maclau, who is a developer, bought the entire block that I believe Con Edison was on, which is just south of the United Nations. It was supposed to be for all affordable housing. To give you an idea how long it has been remained as an empty lot, is that I had this discussion with then council member Dan Gorodnik. I said, Dan, when is this going to, we need this land, we need this affordable housing. He said, can't make him build. Now the question is, where does Mr. Maclau and other developers, who do they buy the land from? I don't know the answer. Who do they buy the land from? They weren't born there. It's not a birthright. Anybody. Anybody.
Rita, you can actually go through Department of Finance. I suggest also contact the Department of Finance, but you can check the Department of Finance's ACRA system, and that will show you any kind of property transactions. I'm not sure how far back it goes, but I believe you can look at the history of transactions for property sales through ACRA, which is Department of Finance's.
So basically, according to Anthony, we had rules and regulations in place that we wouldn't be having this discussion now. I think that as a committee, I think that we should demand that be reinstituted, or how did it fall out of favor or whatever, because this is just going to go on. And everybody keeps on saying, but we don't have any land to build. And here we can give you enough land to build for 20,000 affordable houses right of way. And nobody's moving and nobody's doing it. I think this is really a terrible situation. It doesn't speak well for our country. It doesn't speak well for our city. It really thumbs its nose in the area of, we don't care about affordable housing. We'll do what we want to do when we want to do it. Well, that really isn't really very good. I'd like to know what we can do. What do you think, Anthony, Elizabeth, the board, what do you think that we can do to bring this to light? This.
Oh, I think that I think we need to do a little more probing research before, as a committee or as a board, we make any kind of firm recommendations. I think we're learning a lot about the ways in which the various city agencies are operating on this subject or this kind of subject. And so I think that maybe in the coming months we'll be able to speak more directly to those who can actually make real changes in these things. I mean, that's sort of my answer. The lot you're talking about has been vacant for so long. I can only barely remember what was there before, and I've lived in New York for 40 years.
I know that piece of land. It was there, you're right, for a very long time, and so has this land on south of United Nations.
Yeah.
I don't want this to get lost and pushed under a pile of papers, because yes, we are having a new mayor. Obviously, that person is somebody who may have some input on this, but this is really a shame. It really is. It's a field of shame.
Yes.
And so thank you for
Thank you, Rita.
letting me vent.
Yeah, and okay, so we actually have two members of the public, but I'm going to call on Alita first.
And Anthony, with all due respect, I'm going to ask you to defer because we always go to the members of the public first. So I also have a lot of opinions, as you know, but I would like to say that maybe some kind of town hall is warranted. There's a new thing out there where diverse members of the community, in terms of their own views, liberal, conservative, far left, far right, sit down together, maybe with or without elected officials, and try to brainstorm a particular problem. And maybe brainstorming affordable housing is something, because we live in the densest residential community in the city. And yet over the last bunch of years, according to George Janes, we have lost 14,000 affordable units and nothing coming in with all of the luxury housing. The new beautiful building on 78th and Lexington has apartments in size from 3 to 5 bedrooms, with nary an affordable unit amongst them. So I will wait if you don't forget to come back to me. Thank you.
Okay, I promise I will. All right, so Andrew Ravishia.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. And Alita, thank you for deferring to me. And then also you set me right up for what I'm about to say, because this issue of accumulated lots is a real crisis point in our neighborhood. Alita, you mentioned that we've lost 14,438 rent stabilized units since 2007. That is more than half of the 23,552 rent stabilized units that Manhattan has lost since 2007. And we are fed the lie again and again that we have no room for housing, and so we have to build taller. We end up knocking down the housing that is affordable that we actually have. And the reason I'm wording it that way is because, as we know, affordable housing is not affordable. It tends to be market rate, which is out of reach for many people who have been in this city for generations and people who want to be here, who want to serve our communities and make the city richer and better. And we see this, happen again and again, this process. I'm looking right outside my window now on First Avenue. We've lost maybe, dozens of units of affordable housing. And I'm just talking about units. There's usually more than one person per unit. It's on First Avenue between 79th and 80th. There were not only lots of units of affordable housing, there were housing that is affordable, but there was a bodega, there was a diner, there was a vegan restaurant. And we're not only losing housing, which is important, but we're actually losing local economies, because for every dollar that's spent at a mom and pop shop, 66 to 67 cents of that dollar stays in the community. We're losing jobs. And it's no coincidence that crime is up in our area when there are no eyes on the street. At that site, there have been muggings and there have been graffiti tags when there never was ever before, because there were eyes on the street, even late at night. And so this is happening not only over there, but this is happening where the hardware store was on 2nd Avenue, the southwest corner, I think on 83rd and 2nd. Right across the street from that is the Big Daddy's Diner that's now out of business. I'm worried that that block is going to be demolished. This is happening everywhere. And while I'm looking out at empty lots, I'm also looking at high-rise luxury monster tall towers that are being built 40 stories high. That's further driving up prices, further defining what market rate is, which is making market rate even more unattainable for people, eliminating even more restaurants, more diners for large, spacious lobbies for these buildings. And so this is a real crisis point. And so I'm so encouraged to hear that we're starting to formulate an action plan in order to stop this madness. The new mayor, whoever it's going to be, has a lot on his or her hands. I encourage that we reach out to whoever the candidate is in the next month or two, or whenever we get back, to welcome them into our community, to share our vision of inclusion, that we want affordable, or rather units that are affordable here. We want mom and pop shops. We also don't want the degradation of our environment, because I've talked at length about the climate change implications about these buildings that are too tall, or the moldy and mildewy lots that happen or that occur when these buildings are demolished. And it's so bad that the Department of Environmental Protection actually advised people not to walk within a block radius of that spot. And so I'm hoping that we form a plan to reach out to this new administration, whoever it is, including our new city council person, to other community boards, so we can have a wider ranging, better plan in place. And for the people at the Department of Buildings and the Department of City Planning, with your knowledge of the inside of the system, so to speak, what would you advise us as we're trying to move forward and really stop this crisis that's been happening for anywhere from 20 to 40 years?
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, we have Lois Cohen, member of the public.
Hi there, am I live?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so first time caller. I'd like to add to the list of areas of concern, the properties on 3rd Avenue near 75th Street. I was aware that the owners of the property filed demo permits for the steak and the Candle Cafe. That's not immediately adjacent to where they demolished the Manhattan Shade a few years ago. And by the way, that's been sitting vacant for I don't know how many years. But now as I walked around, it seems that the vacancies and the boarded up areas are extending down 75th Street, going towards 2nd Avenue. Anyone aware of what's going on there? They've vacated the apartments and the shops, and now they're getting ready to demolish, but I can't find anything about any plans for that area. So I just add that to the list of locations for concern.
Thank you, Lois. It's a very good point. I think we know about the proposed demolition, but nothing about what might be replacing it. And now I have Valerie Mason.
You want to go to Alita first, or?
Oh, okay. I'll go to Alita first.
See, you did almost forget me.
No,
but...
I didn't. I was saving you for the end.
I'll wait then if that's what you want.
No, go ahead.
But there is something that needs to be done because we don't have affordable housing. And what happens is, with many other things, unintended consequences. So the as of right allows prices for land to travel upwards in a speed so fast that it compels landlords to just warehouse their buildings. I'll empty them out. I'll let a developer put together a whole bunch of other buildings, and I'll get more money for my building because now I'm part of a lot, or I'm part of an assemblage that allows these super tall buildings to go up, or super wealthy buildings, really, because how many New Yorkers could afford starting prices of $2 and $3 and upwards millions of dollars for apartments? So they're not even for New Yorkers, much less middle income and lower income people. What about the teachers, the nurses, the secretaries, people, the shop clerks, the department store, if we still have them, clerks, people who need, maybe even scientists, people who need apartments and need a place to live. New York City can't just be about the wealthy. There has to be provision of housing for the middle income and the lower income people too. Otherwise, we're not a city, we're just a high-rise suburb, which we don't want to live in and which doesn't serve us. These buildings are for foreign investors and not people who live in the city. That's one thing. The other thing is to just have to rely on public-private so-called partnerships to build affordable housing is seriously misguided. And if you look at the Soho NoHo plan, where everyone's touting, wow, we're going to have 25 or 30% affordable housing units. What about the other 70 and 75% of units? Those are market rate. Those are not increasing diversity. They're not really increasing affordable housing when you compare proportion. We can't just rely on it because, and those are not even in perpetuity. Given the druthers of developers from what I've seen, and I know that there are some good ones out there, but we are just not seeing them. They will build as high as they can and as expensively as they can, and to hell with people who can't afford it. And that's not what the community board wants. And I don't believe that's what the community wants. And we are really suffering, and we are screaming into deaf ears because no one at the city level seems really interested in providing affordable housing on the Upper East Side. There's no requirement that developers put in affordable housing. There's no purchase of land by the city to build affordable housing. There's nothing like the Mitchell-Lama, which maybe there ought to be, and there needs to be a reconsideration. And all of this business of as of right, does the city no good, because developers will just do whatever they can. It's capitalism, it's profit making, and the rest of the people who want something different, who care about community and care about neighborhoods and care about our neighbors, are just left screaming in the dust. And it's just wrong. I'm sure I've got more to say, Anthony, but I will stop right now because this is really, I grew up in the Bronx, and I grew up in housing that was middle income housing. And without that, I would never have been able to have all the benefits that growing up in New York City gave me. And that should not be deprived. I mean, people should not be deprived of that, much less having to commute for 2 or 3 hours to get to a job that doesn't pay enough money for people to live in the city. So there needs to be something done, and everyone is screaming affordable housing, but there isn't a plan. And so I support the idea of having the community board or other working alone or together and figuring out from people, hearing ideas, because people together can come up with great ideas that developers are not just doing on their own. Goodness knows this administration is not just doing on their own, and we have to have something that's done. So I fully support the idea of getting more information and demanding that there be something to stop this bleeding of affordable housing and the warehousing of units and the empty lots. And for Lois, that lot on 76th Street or 75th Street, that big block long lot, is for, as I think Anthony put it, Lenox, Northwell Hills, other extra space. So we don't know what they're doing with it yet, by the way. And I will stop now for good. I mean, for a while anyway. Thanks, Anthony, and Elizabeth too.
Okay, thank you, Alita. Next we have Valerie.
I'm not sure how to follow that, except to say, well, first of all, I'm very interested. It's not often we get somebody from the Department of City Planning and the Department of Buildings to attend at one of our meetings. So I'd just like to say thank you for showing up. But, you know, I think Andrew was asking a question. I'm really trying to understand, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful here, what kind of city planning is actually going on at the City Planning Commission? Because we're seeing all of these, zoning for accessibility, open restaurants, but we're not really seeing anything that addresses any of the concerns regarding affordable housing, 210 height limit perhaps on the Upper East Side, anything that really we've been asking for years. So I really want, I'm not trying to put you in a corner, but like what kind of planning is going on at city planning to address this affordable housing question? And what do we need to do to get somebody over there to start really looking at this issue? Because one of the concerns is why isn't there something coming out of city planning that curbs how long these lots can be vacant, like a tax on these developers who actually get rid of the affordable housing and now are sitting on these empty lots where trees are growing and wild weeds and whatever. And we have these empty lots that are doing nothing for the community. And basically they're paying taxes on an unapproved lot. So I think everyone is a loser in that regard. So I asked Tony, I mean, what is going on at city planning?
Yeah. I mean, I too am a New Yorker who lives here and tries to afford this city on a municipal salary. I understand your frustration and I hear all of you. It is often unfortunate to be the face of larger issues that people have with municipal government and capitalism in general that I personally can't solve. But the Department of City Planning has consistently stated that the creation of affordable housing is one of our top priorities as handed down through this administration.
Right, I understand
we are
that it's
only
a priority.
allowed to work within the parameters of what we are legally allowed to do. And so, Alita mentioned, the Soho NoHo neighborhood plan and how that plan is pushing for, a certain percentage of affordable housing. That is the legal mandate in which we can create affordable housing in Soho NoHo. We do not have a legal mandate to say we're rezoning Soho NoHo and all new housing has to be affordable. That's not something that we are legally allowed to do. I think the sort of changes that people want to see are things that need to be handed down as legislation through your elected representation, because we are limited by what we are allowed to do. We are not allowed to just create new rules out of thin air.
Okay, but then explain to me where zoning for accessibility came from, and why can't you do the same thing with respect to affordable housing that you're putting forward on zoning for accessibility, where you're going to give basically favors to developers for this is my own personal bias, for BS accommodations on transit and accessibility for disabled people. I don't understand why the same urgency and energy is being put towards zoning for affordable housing. I mean, I'm not saying that you, Tony, personally are responsible for that, but where should we be directing our energy? There's got to be somebody over there who's tagged with this issue.
We work constantly on what could we do to increase affordable housing across the city. But like I said, we are bound by whatever laws regulate what we are allowed to touch and the justification that we can provide for making those changes. So zoning for accessibility does mirror similar projects across the city in terms of MIH and inclusionary housing, in that it is offering a bonus for providing a particular amenity. And that is one limitation that we have to work within, is that we cannot just create exactions on developers. It's illegal and we are not allowed to do it. And so while you might disagree with the, with what is offered based on what the developers are providing, like that is one legal framework that we are allowed to operate in. And it's really difficult for us to operate beyond that and, just claim the city by eminent domain and then build affordable housing. Like we don't have a
Okay,
legal
but that's not what I'm asking you to do. What I'm saying to you is who would give you the charge to say, you see every project, every building that comes in New York City. And so you've seen over 10 or 15 years, and especially on the Upper East Side where we can catalog ad infinitum all of these empty huge lots and warehousing of empty buildings and the loss of affordable housing units, minimum affordable housing units that we've had. Okay, so when does city planning come forward and just say, hey, maybe as of right, you guys keep talking in terms of bonus. How about in order to be as of right, you have to provide these minimum affordable housing? And like, if you as a developer are going to raise 10,000 units of affordable housing, I'm thinking about Gary Barnett and all the buildings that he tore down on First Avenue between 79th and 80th. Now 2 years, people who had places to live are gone, and he isn't going to put anything in the ground there. Why is he allowed to just sit there with that empty land? I mean, for a variety of reasons, I would think city planning would come forward and say, at least you got to pay us some tax for, you're sitting there, or do something, and that this as of right concept doesn't work anymore in the city of New York. I mean, tell us why as of right is something that should go forward. I mean, you guys are the city planners. You're looking 10, 15 years in the future. Who's there deciding maybe as of right is something that needs to go by the wayside? And forget about this idea of bonuses. It would be like, to have an as of right project, you need to provide X, Y, and Z. And if you don't, and if you raise those buildings and within 3 years of raising them, you don't have a new project in the ground, then you need to start owing the city of New York a lot of money. I mean, I'm not sure. I thought the planning was supposed to come out of your agency.
Again, I understand your frustration, and the planning does come out of our agency in partnership with many other people, but we are forced to work within the mandates that we're given. And so I understand what you're saying. Those directives would come from your political representatives, whether they be the city council or city hall. There would need to be changes to the city charter and the legal mandates under which we can operate as an agency.
Well, then
we have authority to do what you're describing.
Okay, but then what right do you have not to enforce our request for 210 height limit?
We are not under a legal mandate to grant every request from every community member. I'm not sure what you're looking for there.
I'm looking for a 210 height limit. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, and that would come through proper justification of a 210-foot height limit and a private application asking for that to be done.
Well, I think you've had that in your office for a long time.
We have not had an application asking for a 210-foot height limit in our office. We have no such application in our office.
And you don't have any request from us for that?
We have heard a verbal request from this community board to create a 210-foot height limit on the Upper East Side.
And did you not say at a meeting that you wouldn't do it?
The director of city planning said that we would not be the applicants in that scenario, that if you as a community board would like to be the applicants and submit an application, that you are welcome to, and we will process that application.
But you could be the applicant if you wanted to. That is within your legal mandate.
The Department of City Planning can be the applicant on projects, yes.
So why wouldn't you do that?
The Department of City Planning has not seen enough justification that a 210-foot height limit would help us achieve the goals of the city. Chiefly among them being the creation of affordable housing.
I want to jump in here. We're going to take it up briefly later on. We actually have an application at the Department of City Planning for on the only streets and avenues that don't have height limits on the Upper East Side for a height limit of 210 feet. And we have discussed it with the Department of City Planning. It's in the process. It also requests that the tenements and low buildings on the first, second, third in New York be saved, be protected, because that protects the affordable housing and also small business. So the issue has been before the Department of City Planning for, I think, several years now, and we are working on it. I'll bring up very briefly later, but it's no surprise to the Department of City Planning.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Will, I think Alita wanted to speak again. Normally, I don't like letting people speak more than once, but Alita wanted to speak and actually had something I think relevant to say about this particular, this sort of the direction we headed off in.
Thank you. It's only about the city planning meeting that was held to talk about the 210-foot height limit. And city planning said, and I was chair of the board, so I was at that meeting with other people from the board, and city planning said that if we could show that changing the height to give us a 210-foot limit would not cause a loss of affordable housing, that they would work with us on the application. And so I asked George James to do a study on affordable housing, and that's where he determined that, or he found information to support the great loss of affordable housing in the community, that we are losing, hemorrhaging, if you will, affordable housing units while the buildings coming in are not increasing the number of units at all. So that would seem to fulfill the requirement that would lead to city planning working with us on a 200-foot height limit to 10, because we are certainly not seeing affordable units in the community being built. And that's all I'm going to say on that. And thank you very much for doing that, Anthony and Will.
Thank you, Alita. It's a pertinent point. I'm going to call on Peter Patch next, and then we have Billy, and then Michelle, and then a couple of more.
Thank you, Anthony. I love following Alita and Valerie because you both say what I'm feeling in a much more articulate way than I could say it. Having said that, one of the things that most impresses me with this community board is how informed and passionate and committed we are to the interests of the community. And at the same time, in a relevant sense, how ineffective we are in having that voice heard and acted upon in the larger kind of political environment. And possibly one constructive suggestion that I've heard from Alita was the notion of having, say, a town hall on this particular issue of affordable housing, which frankly, I've heard since before the first day I joined the community board. I remember Ben Kalos asked me for my view on it. And I said, well, at a minimum, I'd like to see that whenever you destroyed affordable housing in the new development, those affordable units were replaced within the new development. So having said that, I see the affordable housing as a major issue. I see, and I don't know if this is legal, but it strikes me, if somebody destroys a number of units, that should not give them a free ride with regard to the taxable revenues to the city from those units. It seems, again, I don't know the legalities of this, but essentially they're destroying value within the city. And it doesn't, my thought is, or asking, could it be possible that they were nonetheless at least on the hook for the taxes that would have applied to the units that they destroyed rather than getting a free ride on an empty lot? In any case, I would like to support the idea of having a town hall on this in a way, and with the objective of not only bringing together our informed voices on it, but also enrolling the elected officials in showing up and getting more impact for our voices and our community point of view in the political process. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Now we have Billy Freeland.
Thanks, Anthony. I want to get back just to this question of how do we combat these lots that remain vacant and vacant for years, and trying to understand what levers we have as a city to combat that. So for DOB, I guess, my question is, when a developer wants to demolish and presumably you grant a permit, does that give you any leverage over them to say, look, if you've demolished and this lot remains vacant for X number of months or years, you've made no movement to develop, could that permit be tied to any opportunity to fine a developer who keeps a lot vacant for a certain period of time? Do you have that power? And if not, where would we as a city start to go to kind of get that power over a developer?
Department of Buildings does not have that power, but like as others have stated, your best suggestion would be contact your elected officials to work on legislation to develop new laws that could provide such power. Right now, we operate within the scope of the law that the department is allowed to operate under.
Just to be clear, because I'm all for that, talking to our elected officials, but if such a law, would that be empowering the Department of Buildings with that power? Do we know which agency, I don't know, Department of Finance, does that have to be at the state level? Do we know which agency would have to be empowered with that ability?
Well, if some future law would specify which agency would be empowered to perform those activities. If it in the future that some law empowers the Department of Buildings to perform it, then the Department of Buildings will perform it under the scope that is provided to us.
Okay. And then, where we see developers keeping lots vacant, do you have any insight as DOB into, why those lots are sitting idle for so long? I mean, what we sometimes hear is the developer has torn down some buildings, but there's an adjacent tenement building. They've got one holdout tenant. I mean, we hear that example. I'm wondering whether that's something that you hear of as a reason why, the period from demolition to actually building anew is such a long time. Do you have any, particular insight into why that is?
The department only receives insight on properties that submit applications to the department for review. If a property or if a space remains vacant, the department doesn't maintain contact with the ownership as to why it's vacant, unless it's otherwise specified to the department in the process of submitting some sort of application to us.
Okay, got it. And then to open up to DCP, I don't know if DCP, you have a view on this about, there's a proposal to have a land value tax or to at least increase the tax on the land, because we have a system largely driven by property taxes. And if you have an empty lot that hasn't been improved, I'm imagining there's very, very little tax on that. There's probably some. Is it the view of DCP that such a tax on the land saying, hey, this is a negative externality you're creating, we want to create funds for real affordable housing, social housing, and the like, would that be consistent with your mission for creating more housing and more affordable housing? Is that something DCP hasn't just not looked at? And if you haven't looked at it, is it something you'd be willing to examine?
I personally have not heard any comments about such a proposal from either the chair of the City Planning Commission or our general counsel. And so I think it would be inappropriate for me to comment on it as a representative of DCP at this time.
Okay, just in the interest of time and knowing that others want to speak, I'm going to leave it there. But I think as a community board, it'd be great if we could weigh in on concepts like a land value tax, on potential legislation to empower whichever agency is appropriate to, if not tax, then fine developers who are keeping these lots vacant. Very simple argument. This is creating negative externalities. Andrew talked about earlier, losing eyes on the street. You're perhaps creating less sanitary conditions in front of these buildings. They're less well lit. And of course, we are losing housing and we are losing storefronts. And then for years, we're going with vacant lots while a developer, who knows, maybe waits for that holdout tenant so that they can demolish the next building, maybe waits for the next council member who's going to be willing to concede some sort of trade-off of more height for more quote unquote affordability. But we really should weigh in on this. And I don't have all the answers, but we've heard sort of repeatedly from DOB and DCP, oh, we've got to go to our legislators. So let's do it. Let's go to our elected officials and say, we want either some specific proposals or in general, we want legislative solutions along the vein that we're talking about. And lastly, maybe we want to urge DCP to look into something like a land value tax and how it fits in with their overall mission. So I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Billy. Michelle? Somewhere?
Yes, hi, thank you. Yeah, you can hear me. Well, firstly, let me just say this. I'm eager to have affordable housing in our area too. We've all been proponents of that. But I want very much to remind everybody that we are talking about private property. This is not a bad concept, nor is capitalism. So the solutions in order to get affordable housing lie in some kind of benefit or stimulus to an owner of private property, which we have tried to do. And the other thing is government housing, which can be built like Mitchell-Lama, where I believe some partnered with unions or other, interested groups. And that's something that the city has not done for many, many years. So I think it would be a great idea to have a forum and a discussion, whether it involves other community boards, whether it's done down at the borough board, wherever it's done, but bearing in mind that private property is the root of our economic system. And what we want to do is curb overzealous developers, but we don't want to take away their incentive, which is primarily their profit motive. Instead, we want to make sure that affordable housing and housing for profit, although affordable housing can be housing for profit, that they exist in tandem. Also, it's my understanding that there are taxes paid on vacant lots. I guess, of course, they're not as much as taxes paid on developed real estate. But can you verify or let us know if substantial taxes are paid on vacant lots? And let me also say, it's not necessarily within our purview to decide whether an owner of private property should or what he should or shouldn't do with it outside the limits of safety, accessibility, and all those kinds of things which benefit all of us. Otherwise, a private person with private property needs to be incentivized. And that's basically why the accessibility project came in. That one is disturbing to me because it's specifically to do something that the MTA should be doing, and we should not have to compromise that much to give the ability to give money to the MTA. There are plenty of other ways of doing it. Firstly, MTA can manage their budget a little better than they have over all these many years. We could float bonds to raise money for the MTA. There are a million other things we can do, and I'm hoping that one day we have a meeting about that. I think I was very disappointed that we had to give away so much for that zoning for accessibility. I think we are entitled to accessibilities to our subway, and we shouldn't have had to give all that away. I'll conclude with that, but I want everybody that when they're talking about their suggestions, we have to bear in mind that it is not in anybody's best interest to breach the rights of a private property owner, only to incentivize them and to encourage our city to build more affordable housing. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Well, we have Wendy McAver, then Rita and Greg and Sherry. Wendy, you could be unmuted wherever you are.
She has the ability. Her computer just takes a little bit of time to unmute.
Oh, okay.
It seems like her computer's having problems, so maybe go to
Okay,
somebody
so I'm
else
going to
and we'll
skip
come
and
back
we'll go
to her.
straight ahead. We will go. I'm going to skip you for a moment, Rita, because you've already spoken. Oh, what the hell? Rita, go ahead.
I would like to propose that we have a task force of all of the people like Valerie and Alita and everybody else who is involved. There are so many aspects of affordable housing and cities. Last night we had social justice and education. And what it is that we are segregating our neighborhoods, therefore our schools are being segregated. We are building apartments that are not being occupied, therefore the small businesses are not making any money from it. So it is really, there are many aspects of this. I certainly don't understand the taxes. I'm too old to even try to, but I trust that there are people on this board who really do understand that. But I think we need, before, so that we could have a forum that means something other than just having a forum. When, do people understand that time is marching on and we're still at the same place? We're still at the same place that we were 60 years ago. So I'm just proposing that perhaps a task force that will decide on how to form a forum and what we can get out of it. That's all.
Thank you, Rita. I think that's a good idea. Is Wendy's computer back alive?
Yes, it is. Can you hear me?
Awesome. Yes.
Thank you so much. It's the hazards of having a really old laptop that is on its last legs with an ice pack on the keyboard. I wanted to thank you, and I also wanted to thank the members of DCP and DOB for being here. It's very wonderful to hear what you have to say, and I'm hoping it's wonderful that you hear what we have to say. I'm really surprised to hear the reaction to our request for a 210 height cap on the avenues that don't already have it. And Michelle was right. There are various legal edicts as to why it is proper to regulate private property. Health, safety, and welfare is pretty much articulated in all the cases that come down from the Supreme Court under the 14th Amendment, which gives municipalities the right to zone, and we have to make many restrictions. For example, I don't believe that it is possible to have a pig farm property. It sounds like a ridiculous example, but I'm trying to make it way out there. However, the Penn Station case, the Penn Central case against New York City, they were restricted from going overly high just for the sake of really a kind of an aesthetic purpose, so not even a safety purpose. But the reason I bring this up is that in about 2019, early 2019, I submitted a research paper to our city councilman, Ben Kalis, and he assured me that he passed it on to you guys at DCP. And it has to do with the fact that there's a tremendous environmental hazard having to do with climate change pollution above the 20th floor. There's an exponential jump above the 10th floor, but an even greater exponential jump above the 20th floor. The 210 height cap would take care of that. It was submitted to you, and he said it was laughed off. So it's not that there is no reason having to do with imminent danger. We were, our area of New York City was heavily flooded in not even the hurricane and Superstorm Sandy. And there are many predictions that this will come back. We can't say when exactly, but that we have other harm. We have a disproportionate number of the Black members of our community and beyond, since particles of pollution don't have good manners and stay where they're produced, traveling to be affecting our members of color in our community at even greater rates than us. There's tremendous urgency to having some kind of restriction on the race to the sky. And we have, I've lived through all my life, and I am both proud and shocked to say that I'm more than eligible to be a member of AARP. And in the 40 years since this model of having private developers incentivized, and I put that in quotes, to build for neighborhood amenities, it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. I live here. I've seen what's come and gone. I've seen all the shiny promises, and it simply doesn't work. There's a million loopholes, a million ways out, a million ways to just wait and wait and wait until nobody's around to object anymore. And it just doesn't happen. Look at all the new buildings that have gone up in our area and have gone extra tall, and there is nothing that the neighborhood gets out of it. I can understand why a developer might want to demolish buildings because they won't have the liability as well as the tax liability. They won't want to have a liability for anybody being harmed by an old building. But if it's going to lay vacant, we already have a forest on 78th and First. Why not turn it into a parkland, even on a temporary basis, to at least green the city? But in terms of the 210 height cap, you guys actually have the research information that was prepared by Andrew Ravishir and me. It's about 14 pages, and every single assertion has a citation and a quote from the actual paper so that you guys can check it out yourselves. And we've been ignored. So I know that my time is limited, but I'm hoping that I actually get a response from the two wonderful representatives that are here, as well as what the limits are as to what they can do. Because it seems to me that you guys actually have a good bit of discretion. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Greg Morris.
Yeah, good evening, everybody, and thank you to the folks from the city that are on. My appreciation as well to my colleagues on the board for what is an interesting conversation. I just want to reiterate, as one of the co-chairs of the Housing Committee, who sometimes gets into conversations that feel a little like this one, that sort of take on versions of what we're talking about, and the complexities of what we're talking about are related to if we want something to change, we would have to change legislation, or the city charter would have to change, or there are budget implications, and what do we do about that? And sometimes we get into conversations that are about our economic development strategies, and we all have different project management approaches, and sometimes we think we know better sometimes than the folks who are identified as experts that are talking to us. All this to say, I recognize and I'm aware of the complexity of whether it's trying to resolve the height cap or try to do something about that, or whether it's related to actually seeing some sort of affordability change in our district. There's a lot of complexity and a lot of moving parts. And I heard very clearly, Rita Popper in particular, Rita, the last meeting that we had where you talked about, we have these conversations over and over, and the one thing that's consistent here is time keeps passing and nothing changes. And so I just want to reiterate to the folks on this. This has been an interesting conversation. There's a lot of moving parts, and I guess I just want to sort of appeal to the chairs, and I will appeal to the chairs of housing as well, to take steps to think about the task force recommendation, Rita, that you proposed a few minutes ago, to think about what happens in between these meetings, to start thinking about if these two or three things are most important to us, here is what it would actually take to try to create some sort of change. And that perhaps what that would mean is less time in these conversations, throwing a lot of stuff against the wall, and instead sort of saying, can we get behind these two or three strategies that actually might be able to affect some sort of legislative change, budgetary change, or other political change required to be able to see something move in the direction that I think we all agree we want it to move in, even if we don't necessarily immediately agree how it would look at the end. So all this to say, to these chairs, and I'll make this appeal to the Housing Committee chairs, task force engagement between now and our next meetings to try to pick on some particular topics so that when we can have the most constructive conversations we can, I think would be most useful, and we can call upon the expertise that we most need and we can listen to and absorb, and then to try to figure out in these conversations what action steps are required, not just what we're frustrated by, but what actions would make a difference. And I'll do that for my committees. And again, thank you, Rita, for bringing that to the table. Once again, you brought that up at the Housing Committee meeting. I heard you clearly then, and I hear you now. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Greg. Point very well taken. Sherry.
Hi, I wanted to share my experience in New Jersey as a land use attorney and also as municipal attorney. I think the point was well taken that the city agencies need direction and need authority to promote affordable housing. In New Jersey, without going through our tortured history, I'm sure you've heard of the Mount Laurel decision, which started with a lawsuit brought by the NAACP against a town in Mount Laurel, requiring that the restricted zoning be reduced. It then went to the legislature, which picked it up, and they set up a council on affordable housing that was then abolished. It's now in the courts, but the end result is that every municipality in New Jersey has an affordable housing obligation. Now, the mindset in New Jersey is that developers want to put in affordable housing because their incentive is a building bonus. So even though they have to put in 20% if it's a for sale development, or 15% if it's per rent, their density is increased. So I was just thinking it's a different mindset. And then what happens is that we now have a group called the Fair Share Housing Center, which is kind of controlling the numbers. So the developer goes to this group and says, we want to build this project. It'll have 200 market rate, but it also will have 20% affordable. And then the municipalities in order to meet their obligation, have to enter into an agreement. So my message is, you can't, and I think this is an issue not just in the city, but I would imagine in every every city in the state. I think it has to be a legislative solution, and with guidelines set up, and this is an obligation that municipalities have. Now, municipalities feel very put upon because they're being required to change their zoning to put in this housing. But unless there's some hammer, I do not see this happening in New York. So I would look to, I mean, as I said, I'm familiar with New Jersey, but there has to be other examples where other states are having affordable housing built. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. And I think this task force should look into that. But we have to do with our elected officials have to get involved, and there has to be a public will to require developers, if they're putting in a luxury building, they have to provide affordable housing, primarily either on site or off site, which I understand is not really being done. But I think there's ways to get it done, but it's not at the local level, it's at the state level, and it has to start with our legislators have to have the will to move forward on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. We have Maggie Lehman, and then Marco, and then I think we'll move on.
Maggie, just hit *6 on your phone. There you go.
Yes, this is Maggie Lehman. Have I successfully unmuted?
Yes, you have.
I want to thank Community Board 8 once again for an extraordinarily effective, specific, impressive series of comments. Josh, thank you for being there for city planning. 3, 4, 5 years ago in person, I had been listening to the 210 height limit discussion dating back those many years. And Josh, I don't know if you were the rep from city planning then, but at Lenox Hill in-person meetings, at the church, one of the churches up in the 80s. So I'm zeroing in on that because I felt frustrated with the discussion with Valerie Mason and Alita's comments before Valerie's, that Valerie was asking the same questions about the 210 height limit that Community Board 8, the zoning committee, and those of us in the public have been bringing to city planning's attention for so many years. Tonight, to hear the specific numbers, the specific number of lost affordable housing apartments quoted by Alita, quoted by Valerie, taking from George Jane's own research, to have that expressed to city planning via you, Josh, and then to have you say, and I understand you're the messenger, and I'm grateful that you're here. I mean no disrespect, but to then have you, on behalf of city planning, articulate that city planning has not considered the 210-foot height limit, and somehow connect that to it hasn't seen a demonstrable need for more affordable housing. I think that's what I've heard. After we just quoted you the numbers, to me made no sense. What I'm trying to express to you, and why I opened with my, once again, expression of gratitude that we have such an extraordinary CB8 here. What I'm trying to express to you, Josh, is that you are hearing, as city planning has when it has come to our meetings, you are hearing authenticity, you are hearing sincerity, you are hearing that we've done our homework. We are not just saying, you know, please help. We're giving you suggestions and reasons, and we're asking you to take it back to city planning, to internally figure out a way to get it addressed. I get the bureaucracy of city planning, as with other agencies. I get what is within city planning's purview, what city planning can and can't do, what it's not mandated to do. I understand that. But a discussion could then arise, a thinking out of the box discussion could then arise. You, after all, city planning, not you personally, but city planning is an agency that works hand in glove with City Hall, with right now Deputy Commissioner, I guess, Vicki Bean. So there is a close working relationship. Time is going by, as has been commented on here. And with what, particularly the Upper East Side, the most dense community in all 5 boroughs. It's just not a really dense community. It is the densest in all 5 boroughs. For our then, quite naturally, go to who we think are the city planners, as Valerie said, to ask for not just guidance, but to ask for action, hand in glove with us, because of city planning's close working relationship with City Hall. To ask for that, we need you, and that is what we're saying. And we're saying it with, as I said, sincerity. You're taking it pretty good here tonight, Josh, and I appreciate it. I'm usually on Zoom. My iPad froze too, like someone else's, so I reverted to phone. Will, thanks for helping me out here. One other comment. While, yes, private developers get to do what they want with private property, under the law, there is a legal concept of a public policy concept of safety, and to leave blocks and blocks and blocks of demolished real estate on First Avenue alone. One of our great CB8 members listed them earlier. Maybe it was you, Anthony. On First Avenue alone, just between 76th Street and 86th Street, 10 blocks on one avenue, there are 3 block-long demolished vacant properties. The one on 76th, 77th, and First has been vacant 5 or 6 years. The Extell property between 79th and 81st has been vacant over 3 years, maybe between 3 and 4. The one up on 86th and First, in that time frame, 3 years. Yes, there aren't eyes on the ground. Yes, crime has increased. I've been a victim of it twice. Sometimes the lights work on these vacant lots at night, sometimes they don't. The blight that is created, that contributes to the desolate areas and the crime, falls under the public policy of the obligation of city and city planning and zoning and requirements of owners of property to keep their property safe. And it seems to me that that is a starting off point, not only for us and for Community Board 8 and for the fantastic suggestions by Gloria and Alita and Valerie, but we need our city agencies, that's your name, guys, city planning, to get involved. Thanks for giving me this time tonight.
Thank you, Maggie. Okay, I'd like to move ahead a little bit, if only so that we can, so I can ask the other big question, which is, again, I'm sorry, Josh, for you. We have in our very densely populated community, we have a problem with after-hours permits. After-hours permits seem to be granted willy-nilly and essentially continuously, after-hours and weekend permits for construction. We have lots of construction in our community. In particular, the building at 200 East 83rd Street, which has had after-hours permits continuously despite requests that things be otherwise. We were told last year, wasn't a year ago, but last year, we were told that we would be informed about after-hours permits, that we would have an opportunity to contest them or at least find out why they had been granted. Again, it's always been my understanding as an architect that these are not granted as a matter of course, and that after-hours and weekend permits are special, and you don't get every weekend, and you don't get every week after hours, and then you are not at that, under those permits, you're not allowed to then violate them by running all night. And so I guess, what can we do to help you enforce the rules on after-hours permits if we don't know about them, unless we spend a lot of time looking them up?
I know we had talked about 200 East 83rd Street, and it's been, we received a number of complaints about this location. So we have in the past, revoked some of the permits or some of the after-hours permits based on community complaints, especially in regard to like noise or performing after-hours work after their scheduled time has ended. So when we go out for these instances, or we receive complaints about after-hours work being performed outside the scope, or noise complaints, we can go out there and issue violations. Now, in regards to expressly just noise complaints alone, usually if we receive a complaint about an after-hours construction site, conducting undue noise, we look at these variances on a case-by-case basis. So for example, 200 East 83rd Street, we have received complaints of undue noise. We reviewed their application and the scope of work that they're performing, and contacted the contractor and spoke to them about the work they're being performed and what steps they can take to reduce that noise. Or otherwise, they can contact, or they can reach out to DEP and receive a undue hardship permit to conduct work for from the Department of Environmental Protection. If they do receive some sort of permit from DEP, the DOB will approve that permit under discretion of DEP or once they receive it. But the department doesn't have to approve that permit. All AHVs, whether they're public safety, city construction, constructional noise, undue hardship, are approved at the discretion of the borough commissioner. So I know we had spoke about keeping you informed about any after-hour variances for this specific location and the specific job number that they were performing that they were getting HVs under. We also had stated that the contractor should reach out to the community board based on the number of complaints they've received. That is generally not what the Department of Buildings does, unless it's some sort of major complaint, a case where we receive a number of complaints, such as 200 East 83rd Street. We did reduce their hours of approval, and which were agreed upon by Councilmember Ben Kalis' office for Saturdays only, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., and weeknights, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. They were applying for permits, I believe, up to 11 p.m. on weeknights, and Sundays and Saturdays up to I think it was 7 p.m. I can't recall the exact hours, but we did reduce the hours based on those requests. So as far as in the future, informing the community board of active permits for HVs, the department does not do that. You can always reach out to us about a specific site or location that has variances, and we can provide you the information as to why it was approved, why it was denied, or what the scope of work is. And if there are complaints of noise concerns or are complaints of work being performed outside the scope of work, the department will inspect or we will review and see what we can do about reducing the hours, reviewing the application, contacting the contractor to put in more, or to reduce noise on the site, as well as you can also, the community board and the community can contact the contractor, which is on our public profile on Biz, as well as DOB Now, and make requests to receive information from them also. But you can always contact us and we'll review that complaint and send an inspection if necessary. And if there is a violating condition found, we will issue a violation for that.
Do the violations that you issue ever include not granting further after hours permits?
No. We can't do that. In every developer.
Yeah, you're the building department. You're the most important people in the city.
Well, every developer has the opportunity.
I'm only half kidding.
Every developer has the opportunity to submit an after hours variance permit, right? If we receive a number of complaints about it, we can revoke those permits and put a hold on the job for any AHVs in the future until they provide.
That's what I meant.
Until they provide justification, otherwise, showing that they're going to take such and such steps to ensure the community is kept in mind, right? We've done this with 200 East 83rd Street. We have put their job on hold. I'm not sure how long it was. It may have been about a month or so, maybe a little bit longer. But again, HVs are reviewed and approved by the discretion of the commissioner. Any complaint you receive, community board, from elected officials, anybody, let us know. We'll go out and we'll inspect and confirm, and that's the best we can do.
Okay, thank you, Josh. We have two people who want to speak, Marco and then Alida. Marco, please.
Thank you, Anthony. I would like to make a brief comment before, because I raised my hand. The issue about the 210, somebody corner DCP explaining why they didn't receive an application. That is true. They didn't receive an application. I'm sorry to say that, but this application is still processing in our community board. It takes 3 years or probably or something around that time. That I don't want to accuse nobody, but I think we cannot put the blame on the Department of City Planning. Is either money is not available, money is a process, and that is, I think, is what is delaying the 210. And we had to find out a way to speed it up that process, because this is extremely important for our community. Now, with respect to the, before I go to the other topic, is about the task force. It means this case is basically create affordable housing has to be discussed under zoning. And zoning and development, it has to be the leader in that, not a task force, because it's going to encourage, the housing is going to encourage zoning and development. And in the best scenario, it could be also, we can put under the task force, the comprehensive planning. I think that is the right location. We cannot create a task force for whatever we want, but we can put together with a task force. And I think that in this case, in the way that Mr. Lechuga described, he said clearly that in the way that is working, the system doesn't work. So we need a comprehensive planning. And that's, I think, that's in that direction we can work it out. With respect to the variances, yes, it's true. The Board of Commissioners is the decision, but we can create some special, some communication between the community board and the commissioner. The commissioner should have always at least an opinion from the community board saying we oppose, we support something in that matter, and the person who makes the last decision, it should be always the Board of Commissioner. But the commissioner should be, as a part of the process of the of approve any variance, it should listen to the community board. And I mean, as an architect too, I mean, it's hard to say that, but remember, this is a high density community. There is a lot of people that work very hard, and then they usually, especially Saturday, they would like to sleep longer, and then to grant it Saturday permits, I think is completely wrong. It has to be regulated, especially in time, because people, they need some rest. And since there are those buildings almost close to each other, it create they resonate the noise even bigger, especially in early in the morning Saturday, is sometimes even at night. So you have to we have to figure it out how the community board and the commissioner listen to us before he granted any working hours variances. And I think that should be the message for the Board of Commissioners, to listen to us before he granted, because he is the only person in this case that offer these variances. And I strongly recommend we don't have to complain. The best idea is, for instance, that you can request the applicant to send an application that they are planning to file a variance in the Department of Buildings. So our community, they will be aware or alert that what the developer is going to do or the contractor is going to do. So from us, we can even send a letter to the Board of Commissioner and explain what will be our recommendation. So we have to figure out something that we don't encroach the power of the Board of Commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Alita, please.
Thank you. So on the issue of the variances for 200 East 83rd Street, back in December, without going through the story, I received an email from the Department of Buildings that said that the developer had to go through the community board in order to get additional after-hours variances because of the complaints about the noise. So what I don't understand is, having gotten that email from the DOB, they are still permitted to get after-hours variances where they haven't, at least to my knowledge, gone through the community board. Mm-hmm. The second thing is that a few years ago, another developer had to also come before the community board because they also had gotten a lot of noise complaints, and it took an hour or so, if my recollection is correct, to get them to admit that they were going to want the variances for almost a year, 9 months to a year, if my recollection is correct, and that they wanted it because they were going to make more money if they had after-hours variances. So what I don't understand is why, again, the profit-making motive here, their desire to get the building up and sold or rented as quickly as possible, takes precedence over people in a community who, not just during the pandemic, but have really had their fill of construction noise, construction traffic, and just plain construction, especially when the results are not don't seem to be benefiting the community, but that's another point. I just don't understand this at all about the after hours variances. So, and again, Josh and Tony, I do appreciate your being here. We don't really have an opportunity very often to address specifically the DOB and city planning. So thank you.
Sure. Lead, if you don't mind, I would just like to comment on the 200 East 83rd Street. The reason why we had requested that the ownership, told the ownership to get in contact with the community board, as you had stated, was that there was a number of community complaints, not just noise, but work also being performed outside the scope they were approved for. Now, we had requested that prior to them submitting to us a justification for next steps on how to resolve complaints with the community. So we had inspected this site a number of times during the day as well as at night. I could look it up, but I don't have the exact number of times we've been out there, but it was definitely more than 6 or 7 times that we inspected the site for after hours work outside of their scope. I do not believe we issued in a violation for work outside of the scope being, or for work outside of the scope approved. But the reason why we did not follow up with them to tell them that they should continue in contact with the community board, although it's up to you. You as a community board, you can also contact the ownership or contractor to keep you regularly updated on the status of their work, is because we did not find any additional, or we did not observe any additional work being performed outside of that scope. As for AHBs being approved for profit motives, the department only issues AHBs under those five conditions that are under section 24-223 of the New York City Administrative Code. And that is for construction minimal noise, public safety, city construction projects, undue hardship, or safety city construction projects. There's one more, my apologies.
Okay.
There's only five justifications that they can apply under. If they state in that application that this is directly for profit, we would not approve that application.
They're not going to state that, but what they're going to say is undue hardship. And the undue hardship means they're not able to be in a profit-making position. And I know I sound a little bit to the left or socialist, which I'm not. I just think in the balance of things that profit making often takes the place of consideration and thought and doing things the right way, and certainly the community's interests. And with the 200 East 83rd, there was a specific instruction from the DOB to the owner to come to the community board to get any additional after hours variances. So I don't really know what happened, and that you inspected so many times. Where there's smoke, there's fire, which I agree is a bad analogy given Florida and all of that, but there's a problem with the balance here. And the balance seems to be in favor of market rate construction. Maybe the view would be different if it were affordable housing, but 200 East 83rd Street is something that, as was explained to me, took advantage of quality housing rules in order to get additional height. It's a very attractive building, but I don't think there's any affordable housing in there or anything other than luxury housing. The fact that they are able to get these variances without even complying with the DOB's instruction to come before the board is astonishing to me. And with respect to the other developer, it took that long because first they said they needed a variance for 3 weeks, and then it became a month and a half or whatever it was pulling teeth to get them to agree, to get them to admit rather that they wanted the variance for about up to a year. I don't know if anyone who was at that meeting is at this meeting. And then to say that ultimately, well, Anthony was, that it was a money-making thing that they wanted this. They're not going to say that on the application because they know how to do this. It's just the community really loses. And without, there's no deference to the community, and we're besieged by the noise and the trucks. When during that time that they were getting the variances on 83rd Street while I was still chair, I got emails from the community about the noise that was going on. And it's it's really hard. And when the balance is so far in favor of the construction, I think the community really suffers for it in more ways than are obviously apparent, which is redundant. So thank you again, and I will stop here, Anthony.
Thank you, Alita. And I think that, and I just want to add my thanks to both Josh and Tony for not only showing up, but also for sticking it out this long. And I think I will now turn this meeting over to Elizabeth. I unfortunately have to drop off. I have another, I have a little bit of a family thing that requires my attention. So I'm going to drop off, but Elizabeth has now reappeared on screen and will, I am sure, be able to, well, the next agenda item is hers. So thank you all.
Okay. Goodbye, Anthony.
Bye-bye.
I will try to make this very quick so that people don't starve to death before the end of the meeting. The next item concerns our application for two special zoning districts, special Yorkville and special Lenox Hill. The terms are of them are identical. One is from 59th to 79th, the other is 79th to 96. We've had a long time trying to get the financing in place. It is in place. Our planner is on board again, and I think I mentioned before, the special districts contains really three provisions. One is a height limit of 210 feet, and they apply, by the way, to 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and York, which are the only streets and avenues in the Upper East Side that don't have height limits of any sort. A height limit of 210 feet, the preservation of the tenements and low buildings, which not only protects the scale, but protects the affordable housing that's in it, and is support for small businesses. What we will be working on as soon as he gets going, which will be, because he has other commitments, we will start after Labor Day, will be to join the applications, make it one application, and work on other provisions that that arose out of our discussions with City Planning Commission, and as we go forward, I'm only mentioning this because he said he didn't know which type he wanted, but we will need volunteers. We will run out of time and money if we can't volunteer. So committee members or even members of the public who would like to help with this, because a height limit is something that you can't, loopholes don't get you around a height limit. 210 feet is 210 feet, whatever way of high ceilings, low ceilings, empty space, whatever you think of, 210 feet does not change. So I'm hoping we will be working on that and fast, because we don't want to lose any more tenements, and we don't want to gain any more of these tall and particularly glass towers, which I am particularly unfond of. Just to bring you up to date, the resolution where we unanimously disapproved of the blood center application was filed yesterday, so we're now on record, and that's going forward. And people have been asking about the Lenox Hill Hospital proposal. That seems to have gone dormant. It's there, but there has been no change and no movement. And so anybody who has a question about any of those three things, happy to call on you. Marco, you have your paw up.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I would like to be one of the first volunteer for the 210, and probably I can contribute some money too, if it's possible. Yes, I'm on board, and I think that is what we need right away. We need urgently, and I'm willing to give my time and help the planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And does anyone else have a question about any of, oh yes, Michelle, Michelle has her hand up.
Yes, I think I'm unmuted. Yes, Elizabeth, can you define for us what you need volunteers to do specifically? What are some of the, what's the process?
Well, I wanted to, and I asked Tuck, who is our planner and architect. I asked him what he needed, and he said he would like to wait and see how it's going on. My guess is that people would need, research, looking things up. The other thing, which is, I would hope other people would sign up for, if he needs this, would be photographers, because I have absolutely no talent at photography, and you wouldn't recognize a building if I took a picture of it. So if we need photographers, we don't need me.
So can I ask?
I think just bear in mind, and then we can certainly, when he decides what he needs, we will send, I think, probably send an email around and say, can you do this? Rita?
Okay. That sounds good. I'd like to volunteer, but I would like to hear some, the parameter of what it is he's requesting. So if you send that email around, that would be great.
As soon as I hear from him, I asked him what volunteers he needed, and his answer was he didn't know yet. So,
okay, sounds good.
But I'm very happy that you'll be volunteering. Rita, can you unmute Rita Popper?
I'm not volunteering for that because I can't add too much. But if Russell is still on here, would it be, first of all, thank you, Tony, thank you, Josh. But now I'm talking about stepping it up. We obviously, affordable housing is in city, state, and federal government. And a task force that consists of small business, because that's what it affects. It affects social justice, it affects that, it affects education, that affects that, and the laws and the legalities. Russell, if you are in agreement.
Russell's not here anymore.
Then I'm talking to the dead air. I will send him an email and try and get him to let us form a task force that combines all of these. I know that Marco didn't think of a task force, but we have too many diverse implications, people who are affected by the lack of affordable housing. And I hope I'll ask them to circulate an email so that we can get a group together, and that group will start working immediately what it is to get the city, the state, and the federal government together. we have a president now who understands affordable housing. We have got to strike while the iron is hot. Thank you all.
Thank you. And I particularly, and I'm sure I'm speaking for Anthony as well, want to thank Josh and Tony for coming and staying and probably starving. But we're very grateful to you for your help, and we look forward to you joining us in the future when you get your strength back. Is anyone interested in moving to adjourn? Okay.
Move to adjourn.
I think people want to adjourn. Am I right in thinking that you wish to adjourn?
Yes, there's many seconds
okay.
to that.
Very good. Well, thank you for coming, and don't melt and survive this heat.